thank you everyone for being here. My name is Raúl Ochoa. I am the head of technology at CARTO, and that means that I envision mid-term, long-term projects and solutions and technology. So I work for several months in a project with the team. So today I'm going to talk about some of the things that we are working on or we just released. And I'm going to talk also about the history of those areas and what we plan for the future in CARTO. I'm going to take a lot of credit from a lot of people in the team, and I saw some faces here already. So this is just one of the first things that I'm gonna do. So a few months ago, we realized that we were not fixing some of the problems in the right place, meaning that we were doing things like, okay, let's take this shortcut for this problem because we can deliver faster. But we realized that that was not the way to go, so we decided to create this team of people to work on the real problems at the right place. And that's something that is starting to pay off in some of the things that I'm gonna show today. So they work basically in the fundamental technology that we use at CARTO, like Postgres or PostGIS or things like that. So the three major things that I'm gonna be talking today about are big data, or what big data is at CARTO, analysis, so how do we enable working with that big data and doing some useful things with it. And also with that new big data and all those new analysis, how you can visualize those things, right? About big data. So most of the time, you don't have big data, or 99% of the use cases are not big data related. Or let's not say it that way. Let's say that not all the customers have big data, but all the customers somehow consume big data. So that's one of the things that we realize when working with data partners like Vodafone or MasterCard. So you are not usually generating as much data as a company like Facebook does, or a company like weather.com, or the sources for weather.com, or a bank, or a telecommunication company like Vodafone. But you might want to consume that data. So anyway, but your business data is also relevant. So one of the things that we realize is, like, if you ask anyone about if they want more performance or less performance, they are going to ask always for more performance. So we invest a lot in creating the technology to have these options to transfer the right data at the right moment to the client. So you can work with a ton of data in the backend, but the client only receives the right amount of data. So we created this thing that we call our smart backend technology, that basically what it does is simplifies the geometries and aggregate the geometries of your spatial problems. So you have to transfer to the client the right amount of data. So there you can see something which might be kind of not worthy because you are lacking some of the precision. But in the next picture, you see that with the same visualization, without lacking any information, you have to transfer 24 megabytes of data in the left of the picture, and in the second one, which is the same representation of the data, you can display the very same thing to your customers. You only have to transfer like 6% of that data. This is out of the box in CARTO. So if you are using vector tiles from CARTO, you get that without having to do anything. And that's without changing anything in your data beforehand, which is, I think, the key part here. But I was skipping the question. So how we leverage big data in CARTO? So you might be attending some of the previous talks about our data partners like Vodafone or MasterCard. So what we plan to do for big data is not putting you the pressure of, here you have 3 terabytes of Vodafone data. Do whatever you want with it. So for us, that's not useful. So what we plan to do is put that in our data observatory offering with the right APIs, so you can ask business questions to those APIs instead of bringing all your data to your system and process that data. And also, apart from the right APIs with the right customer questions in place, we are going to put the same data in a vector format that you can do like visual exploration of the data or visual analysis of the data using vector tiles. If you have any question regarding this or what we are planning for this, please ask me later or ask anyone in the team, because we are already having some conversations around this kind of data. With this new big data, we come to the next thing, which is, OK, now that I have this big data or I have these APIs to access the data or these vector tiles, how do I take advantage of that and I can answer the right question with this? So if you have been using Builder in CARTO before, you might have seen this screen of Analyze and Predict, where you can find like 4 advanced analyses. One is, for instance, the outliers, so you can see if the data correlates what the normal in an area, or it has some kind of outlier. Or you can predict the future with Markov chains, which is the one of predict trends and volatility. But if you check, there are only 4 predict and analyze analysis within the interface. So if you attended yesterday, I think it was Stuart's talk, I stole this slide from him. It's like, there are questions that are more complex than the ones before. So for that, it's not as easy as going to Builder and select some drop-downs and click in some areas in the interface and get the right answer for your business, right? So a year ago, more or less, year and a month ago, we implemented this feature, which is not exposed by default in Builder, but is a way to run a complex analysis that is not just one step, like a buffer or something like that. So it focuses on actual business problems within the CARTO Builder interface. And this, after a year, we enable the research and the solutions team to create like 26 different analyses focused on business problems. This is available, so if you have something like that in your company or for your customers, or you have this problem, again, please talk to me later, because we can enable this for your use case. But this is kind of to focus on some specific problems, but what if you would love to do an analysis? So with that in mind, after 26 or 28 already different analyses, we came to some conclusions. We got a lot of feedback from research and solutions teams, and we realized that the system that we were building, it was not good enough for them. Several reasons. For instance, debugging SQL functions with Python inside of it and other programming languages and accessing external sources within Postgres is kind of difficult. You should ask Stuart if you are around. He will complain like a lot about that. So that's one of the things that we want to fix. That's the developer-friendly interface. But also, as I was mentioning before, this is going to focus a lot in things like how do I access those new MasterCard or Vodafone data sets in a nice way, or how we can still use Postgres for complementing Vodafone or MasterCard data, or what happens, how do I, because right now if you go to Builder, you can run the analysis in the moment, but what happens if my data change? I want to run this every single Monday because I know the Monday I have to have the right answer for my customers. So those are other things that we are going to enable with this new analysis API, and we are still working on it. So the idea here is that you use CARTO frames for the prototyping, and later on, when you more or less know what you want to do, you put that CARTO frame analysis or code inside this new analysis API, and you are able to run this every Monday, or when this data set changes, or with different rules that we are still deciding. Here we have like two modes, as you saw. One is the builder way of doing analysis. So you have some specific question that can run in the order of seconds. We can integrate that in Builder. And that's already available. So talk to me about that later. However, if you are in the other space of big data or long-running processes, I have been talking to some of you already about this. We are planning on having this system so you can implement some kind of ETL analysis where you import data and you do some processing with custom libraries or custom Postgres extensions or things like that in a controlled environment for a few minutes up to a few hours. And you are able to schedule that based on time or data changes in your customer data. We are working on that. We are still defining some of the things that we want to do there. So I have been already talking to some of you around this before, but again, please talk to me because I want to listen to your problems and understand what is best for you. So with this new data and this new analysis, we come to the last part of my presentation, which is vector technology. So I'm going to do a small recap on vector and raster technology. So for you that are not familiar with this, it's like if I take a picture of a train and I print it, I can see how beautiful the train is, if it's red or if it's yellow, but I don't know much about the train. I don't know how is the length of the train or how high the train is. So the picture, it will be raster data, but if I could put along the picture the length of the train or the height of the train or more information, that could be like the vector information for that picture. So well, this is not going to be fair because they were not the first one doing vector at all. But this is probably the most relevant piece of software using vector technology in the last probably 15 years, or the most popular, let's say. So Google were the first ones using vector in a popular tool. Actually, they started to use it, I think, in mobile before the web, but they put everything in the web later. The reasons, I don't know, but my guess is like they have to put customized data for their clients, like probably traffic data or your star places or advertisement, probably, I don't know. And other people might tell you that this is because they want to save money on servers, so everything happens in the client. The cost is put into the end customers. I don't believe that's true. I think just because the experience is better, they decided to do that. But this is just a guesstimation from my side. I never worked at Google, so I don't know. But then Mapbox came to this space, and this as an open format, which is Mapbox vector tiles, which is much nicer because as it's an open format, other companies can benefit from that. And if you don't know, we are partners with Mapbox, and we are collaborating in this space with them. And we are taking advantage of the technology that they built, but we are also bringing ideas to them for the new specification of the format, for instance. But it's quite useful to have an open format, and we are taking advantage of that. So in the last year or so, we have been working on enabling vector tiles in the CARTO platform in engine. So if you go to Builder, it's still raster, it's still fast, it's still good enough for visualization. But we have this demand of having vector tiles in the CARTO platform. But we were not sure about just throwing vector tiles outside without doing anything else. It will be useful for our clients. Why? Because vector tiles, if they are not properly encoded and properly reduced in size, can take several megabytes, up to hundreds of megabytes, just to do a small visualization in the screen. So if you have a data set with 2 million points, transferring that to the client for the zoom level 0 of your map is like probably 50 megabytes of data. It doesn't make sense because you cannot display that amount of information in the client. So that's why we created this aggregation system that I was showing before. So you transfer the right amount of data depending on the visualization and the level of detail that you need for your visualization. All that without removing the dynamic component of CARTO. So you can still use SQL queries to define your vector tile, but on top of that, we can just do the aggregation and serve the right amount of data. That's already available. It's in the developer center, so if you haven't done yet, you should start checking that. I already mentioned some of the things why vector is important. I talked about the experience of having a nicer interaction with the map, or you can do specific things for specific clients without having to go back to the server and do the back and forth requests, because that's sometimes it's worse. Sometimes it's good enough if you don't have to have personalized content or dynamic content on the client. That brings me to the second point in this slide, which is dynamic cartography. So sometimes having a global representation of your data is good. Other times you just want to focus in an area. So having the representation for, I don't know, a neighborhood is probably sometimes more important than having the whole country representation. So with vector information, you can, based on the viewport that you are seeing, you can show that without having to go back and forth to the server. So there is also improvement there, which is the third point of this, which is speed. As I was saying before, if I ask you about having better performance or worse performance, you're going to always tell that I want better performance. Other thing that we have been doing like forever, for a few years now in CARTO is temporal data visualization. So things like torque, animating points over time so you can understand better what is going on. So sometimes it's not good enough just to see static data. If you see the data evolving over time, you can understand better what happened. So that's torque. And we think that with vector tiles we can do much better in that space again. And the last point is a bit controversial because it depends on what you call client-side analysis. But there are things like if I move my mouse over the map, I can do some things like select by a buffer based on the pointer of the. For me, that's kind of an analysis. I am not talking here about doing a Markov chain analysis on the client. For that, probably you have to go back to the server still. So this is a lot of words, but probably if I display some videos, you will understand better all these things. So this is, for instance, the multi-scale thematic map that I was mentioning before. So as the thumb goes in, you see that the cartography changes and is relevant to what you are seeing. So it's not static to the initial view of the map. That is without going back to the server saying, OK, I am just seeing this area, do the representation for this area just right now. Interactivity. You can you get back the data from the map because you already have the data in the client, but you can also do things like highlighting the geometry itself. This is torque, 4 points. This is probably not new for any CARTO customer here, but if we can do torque with polygons, it's much better. So this is how the city of Denver evolved over the years. And and you can see how downtown is. So the color represents how expensive the building is. And you can see how the downtown of Denver is getting more and more expensive as the times evolve. But you can also animate lines. Sorry?
Question. On the animations, I know these are canned, but if you were really using the app, is there a slider that you manipulate? Can you stop the animation at any point and look at the data at that point?
Yeah, we could do that. Actually, if you mouse over and you keep your mouse there, you will get also the information real time, so you don't have to stop. Oh, wow. You can stop, but you don't have to. Okay? And same for lines. So this is something probably also new. Well, not new, at least new in this CARTO presentation. So you might be wondering, so how is this going to happen in CARTO? Because for raster, you have leaflet, and you have CARTO.js, now CARTO.js v4, which is the latest version. How do I do all those maps? So we have been working during the last months in a library for vector, which is called CARTO.vl. Javier already announced it yesterday, but I'm gonna get into more details now about what it's about. So CARTO.vl takes advantage of everything I previously mentioned about aggregating data, simplifying polygons based on the thumb level that you need the data for. It also has a language that is really specific for data visualization. So the multi-thematic map is something that is not easy to do with other libraries for vector, or at least we think it's not as easy as it should be, because the problem is solving that problem, not writing a lot of code just to change some colors. And it works on top of existing libraries. So for instance, if you have already Mapbox.gl maps, or you use Mapbox.gl for your base maps, it works on top of that. So it's good if you already are investing in vector. And it integrates really well out of the box with our base maps, with things like CARTO colors. The interactivity that I was showing before is pretty similar to the previous interactivity, but it gives you more control over other things. And probably I am coming back to the performance. This works like, the team internally call it video game speed. So it's like 60 frames per second with animations, rendering and fast filtering. So it's like, they call it video game speed. I don't know. If you are into video games, you probably know that number of 60 frames per second. And it supports also, I was mentioning before, you don't have to throw so much data to the client because sometimes it's not worthy, it's not better to have more data. It supports like 1 million points at 60 frames per second with animations. And with all that said, I want to do just 2 or 3 examples on how you, from the most basic one to some things a bit more complex. Like for instance, here I am just showing points with a width and a color. And you can see here a language that is pretty similar to CARTO CSS, if you are familiar with CARTO CSS. But if you are more into building applications with JavaScript, we have both APIs, one for CARTO CSS-alike styling language, and another one which is JavaScript based. That's pretty simple, but you can do more complicated stuff like here. Like I can do a choropleth kind of map based on a property of the data and filtering based on that property as well. So here I am filtering the buildings in New York that are between 10 and 120 floors, and I am so coloring the buildings based on that property. And that's all you need to do that. In this case, it will leverage the aggregation, and it will simplify the geometries, so you don't have to worry about that. The library does it for you. The last one is kind of similar, but this is a category map. And I can apply complex mathematical functions. So sometimes your data is so dispersed in the numbers that you have to put it in a value that makes sense for the visualization. So for instance, I am applying here the square root to a property that is aggregated by the sum of the amount of the data. And I also coloring based on a CARTO color ramp using a category based on the most popular category in that cluster. And that's almost 1 million points at 60 frames per second with animations and rendering of categories. This is a GIF, so probably it's not at 60 frames per second, but when we were recording it, it was at 60 frames per second. And again, I took a lot of credit. This was the team that worked really hard for several months. So if you don't do it, I'm going to do it. So quick recap, new data or new big data with data partners, you already can ask for that. New analysis is kind of so we are working on it, but your feedback is more than welcome. And new audience, I mean new visualizations. CARTO is already available since 2 days ago, so check the website. And I am willing to, if we have time, I am waiting for your questions. Thank you.